Welcome to another episode of Retail Media Thursdays with me, David Sequeira, Managing Director at Sky. Today we're going to be speaking to Matt Higgins from iProspect. So come and join us and we'll have a pint and talk everything retail media. Thank you. Hello Matt, welcome to Retail Media Thursdays. I guess to start it'd be great if you could introduce yourself and tell us a bit more about your role.
Yeah, so I'm a managing partner at Dentsu UK and Ireland, and I'm looking after retail media, social commerce, and also affiliates as well. So really acquisition led. I'm based in the performance team.
Great. And we like to start with a peak of the week, so something you've seen today, yesterday, or at least sometime this week, right? That you think has been really interesting, either related to retail media or the broader landscape of, media and marketing.
Yeah, so I actually saw, I think it was on Campaign, that Enemy are launching a streaming platform. I think it's called Enemy Streams, which I think is really interesting, seeing a publication sort of go down that. What I would be interested in terms of marketing is how they look to monetize that. So do they end up with a subscription? Do they end up with hammering it with ads? And how can they kind of make that intuitive for their users? So I think that's due to launch actually sometime in March. So
cool, that sounds interesting. Where are we and why?
So we're at the Duke of York Gastropub, and a really tedious link, but I went to university in York. So any excuse to rep York, I will. And also it's a beautiful corner pub, and I think corners are kind of these spaces where there's always like meeting points and things come together, and it'd just be really cheesy like that, really.
Nice. No, that's fair enough. And it is a Thursday, so we're having a pint.
Thursday, we are, yeah.
Nice. Well, look, we'll get onto the questions and let's talk more retail media.
Perfect, let's go.
So to start, Matt, I want to ask you about retail media definitions. I've been spending a lot of time with the IB at the moment. We're talking a lot about boundaries and these definitions. From your perspective, where does retail media start and end? And also, why are we finding it so hard to define it in general?
Yeah, so I'm going to answer your second question first, because that might get me out of the answer in the first one. I think one of the challenges that we have is that retail media isn't actually a channel, it's an environment where lots of different channels are happening. So you have search through sponsored placements, you have programmatic through display adverts on site, you've got in-store retail, which also kind of falls under the retail media umbrella. So things like Shop and Save and iLens and all of that stuff, in-store radio. And I think that's what's causing a lot of problems with the definition. Because as marketers, I guess we quite like to put things in boxes. So we quite like to point at something and go, that's paid search, that's paid social. And you can't do that with retail media, because retail media itself has to have a lot of boxes within it. I think, and to come back to your first question, our main thing when we think about retail media as a company is we're trying to think about where are things shoppable. Yeah. So when I work predominantly in digital, so for me, digital shoppable experiences within a retail environment. So for me, that could be sponsored placements, it could be on-site display, it could be, it could be any number of things that happen within that environment digitally is retail media. But to actually say, it's CPC or CPA or CPM or whatever it might be, that's really difficult. I think that's why we struggle to nail down that definition of what retail media is.
Yeah, and I guess as you sort of said there, it depends on your perspective, right? Because you come at it from a digital perspective, there are people that define it as being in-store and, online and multiple different ways. So it's not quite as clear as, I guess, some other media.
Yeah, and you have companies like dunnhumby or Nectar who have been, looking after the data for sort of Tesco or Sainsbury's for so long, and they've been utilising it in so many different ways, in-store, club cards, Nectar cards, etc., that actually this is just a natural progression for them. Yeah. So everybody kind of coming into retail media with all the hype and being like, this is retail media, it's got a long history before that. So it's part of an evolution rather than a revolution, I would say.
You mentioned a good word there, which is hype.
Yep.
I actually read a really good article written by some analyst at Forrester. It was a couple of weeks ago now. And they talked about retail media being overhyped.
Yep.
I also noticed on your own LinkedIn, doing a bit of stalking, that you posted an article that talked about, I guess, the promise of retail media not yet being realised and not quite being there. if I look at other digital, media channels when they were kind of emerging, I don't think they ever faced the same kind of skepticism or scrutiny that retail media has.
Yeah.
And I just wondered, from your perspective, why do you think that is?
I think the first thing is we tend to look back with rose-tinted glasses. Because I think there were definitely people within paid search that when Google started to be more aggressive, there was like questions you had to sell into clients. But I would also say that you have to think that, as I mentioned, retail media is a natural evolution to everything that's gone before it. So there's several different things. The factors I would say is that retail media has essentially been around for years, if you think about in-store magazines. And then it's also coming into a market where everything is measurable. And I think the challenge that we have with everything being measurable is that everybody wants measurement now on everything. So there's a little bit, I think, of like a hype train, which is great because it's generating a lot of income for a lot of businesses. But it has to come with scrutiny. I think without scrutiny, we're not going to develop the product. We're not going to make retail media any better. And I think without actually having people pushing back against retail media and retail media activity and questioning the retailers, we're not going to develop into a really strong area of digital marketing. You need to have that to and fro. Otherwise, what will happen is there won't be a fair value exchange. It will just be retailers dictating prices, and you either take it or you leave it. And then I can't see how that then would progress into all of the figures that I know have been quoted many times. By 2025, the billions it's going to be worth. I can't see it getting to there without people actually challenging the norm and just trying to make it better along the way.
I want to touch on another thing you said there, which is measurement.
Yeah.
It is ultimately, I think, going to be the thing that takes retail media from where it is now to the future, as you mentioned. And it will be the thing that allows us to really understand the true value. We did our own state of retail media survey. It's just come out.
That's great.
Thank you. One thing that surprised me, and I don't know if it surprised me, maybe it didn't, because I speak to a lot of brands and agencies, but it is surprising that things like share of voice and digital shelf that ultimately could, easily and internally in an organization push the value of retail media, those things are being used very limited by brands or agencies at the moment.
Yep.
I hear on the grapevine that you guys are doing a number of different partnerships in this area. And I just wondered if you could tell us a bit more about them.
I don't know how many details I can go into without being shot, but we are, as a group, Dentsu are technologically agnostic, and we will work with the best measurement tools that are available for any one of our clients. So whether that be through somebody like Profitero, or whether we've got an audience tool ourselves, or working closely with the guys at dunnhumby or Nectar. That's basically what we would do in order to make sure that measurement is as accurate as possible. I think one of the challenges that we have is I found that particularly in this industry, there's a lot of people you either seem to have people who tend to move from a search background into retail media, and they have the bright lights of Google and all of the demands that they're used to seeing, or you have people moving from the trade team side of things, where historically they've created JBPs with marketing tied to it. And so you have these two separate ways of working. One which is they're actually quite used to not really seeing any direct cause and effect. It's more speculatory, I would say, versus people who are in the industry who are very cause and effect, which is quite interesting. But I guess how I view online retailers at the moment is it's exactly the same. It is a digital version of walking into a store. So if you want to own the shelf, firstly you have to define what does that mean. Does that mean being at the top of every single search? Does it mean that you have to be visible? Does it mean you have to have the most products within that search? There's so many different meanings to that. I think measurement will get better. There's a lot of stuff going through the IAB at the moment, standardization, if I can say it, too many Guinnesses.
Go again.
Standardization.
Yeah.
There we go. And I think that's the big thing, because I think at the moment you have lots of different players currently like ploughing their own fields, doing it their own way. Eventually it will all start to come together, I think, and there will be industry benchmarks for how you should measure effectiveness, how you should measure share of voice. That doesn't really exist at the moment. So I think with the lack of that, people aren't necessarily putting their neck out on the line in order to say this is share of voice or this is how you measure your true effectiveness.
Makes sense. I guess that kind of comes back to the point that we're not seeing it scale just yet across brands and agencies, right?
Yeah.
So that standardization, I said it.
Yeah.
There you go.
Well done.
There you go. That standardization is going to be key. Right?
Yeah.
Nice. Matt, another hot topic when we're talking about measurement, and it's sort of, I guess it's the big topic, let's say, the big buzzword, is clean rooms. Hearing a lot about it, and I think, in particular, Amazon's probably setting the gold standard right now. They are pure play, so I think it makes it a little bit easier in some ways. But when we think about clean rooms around omni-retail, I want to kind of get your perspective on this, because, for a retailer, it is important that they work out ways to share data with brands they work with, but they need to protect their value. But at the same time, they need to provide a way for advertisers to, make smarter data-driven decisions. So where do you sit on this one?
So I think I'll probably start by talking my view on, I guess, retailer data in general, is although retailer data is really valuable, it really doesn't matter how much data or the quality of data that you have if you don't know how to use it. And so you could have the biggest clean room in the world with the most quantified, qualified data in existence, but if the people that you're sharing it with, the agencies or the brands or whoever it might be, aren't able to actually do anything with that data or use it in an effective way, then the data itself is kind of useless. So the value is, there's two parts of the value of data. One is it obviously has to be clean, it has to be good quality data, but the real bit is using it in the right way. And so I think there is a balance that needs to be struck when you're taking data across multiple retailers, and I think this is where the IAB comes in with things like standardization. I did, with standardizing like various practices, what can potentially be collected, how it can be shared, etc. And then I think really the game is going to be who uses it the best. So dunnhumby at the moment are doing really cool things with data. They have the product which links straight into Facebook. They've got the relationship with ITVX, I think as well. Like they're really using their data in an intelligent way, which means, as a retailer or as a brand, as an agency, when you're having conversations with them, it's not just saying that, we've got these pools of hyper qualified data that we know is really good for your brand. It's also saying, well, actually, you can use this data to activate Facebook campaigns. You can use this data on ITVX. You can use this data, in any different ways. So, I think brands probably need to be less concerned about being able to give the data to retailers need to be less concerned about giving data to brands, because the data itself is probably worthless if the brands do nothing with it. So, I think. There is a balance, and I think I've ended up in the middle of the fence again here. But again, I do think that a not necessarily a free for all on data, but if we can have data that is available for brands and then brands can build on top of it, that would be perfect. I don't think there would I don't know if there would necessarily be any better or worse value to the data if it came from, say, a Tesco or a Nectar or Waitrose or whoever. So kind of straight down the middle. The data is important, but what you do with it is important to.
Important to. That's a good word. It's actually interesting when we think about the first question I asked you, which was around the boundaries of retail media. And naturally, as we've spoken and we kind of got into measurement and we got into data, you started talking about social. Which again, probably comes back to this whole idea about where does retail media start and end, and even in the digital sense, we're now almost talking about the shopper, as you mentioned, and we're almost moving into talking about connected commerce and how the whole thing moves together, as opposed to sort of retail media. So we've gone full circle, which is, probably a good thing.
And I think with that as well, we're really fortunate because we're a full service agency that we actually have expertise in all of these different areas. There's some agencies who may be specifically looking at retail media or specifically paid search or specifically Amazon that maybe don't have the same breadth as we do as an agency. So it's great for me in my role and my job because when we do have the conversations with dunnhumby about using a Facebook audience, I can just literally walk over to the wealth of Facebook and paid social specialists, have a conversation with them about it. How does it work? How does it tie in? And that's why I said earlier on, like it just goes across all the channels. It like transcends every single channel, and that works well for us because we do every single channel as well. So that's why it's an environment and not so much a channel. Yeah,
that's really interesting, and I think in some ways, sort of the structure of the agency is going to change. How you bring those channels together, how you start thinking about the shopper holistically. Breaking down, we have to break down the silos, which you can do via technology, for example, but you also need to be able to do it with sort of skill set and people. Which brings me to my final question, actually. And I want to talk talent. So switching gears slightly. Ultimately, if you think about this marketplace, it's quite challenging to find talent. I mean, it's quite new, right? So therefore, thinking about where do you find experts? And if you think about it as well, you've got agencies like yourself, you've got retailers, you've got brands, and you've got technology vendors like ourselves. And ultimately, we're still all going after the same people because there is, a lack of them, let's say, in terms of total expertise and knowledge in this area. How are you dealing with that? And hopefully, you're going to give me some tips so I can still.
I've had a couple of conversations regarding the skill set that is needed for retail media, because I think that's the real crux of it. Is you need somebody who's probably got the relationship understanding of, say, somebody in affiliate marketing who deals with multiple different partners. You need someone who's got the data and analytical sense and understanding of maybe setting up paid search or paid social campaigns. You need somebody who tends to be like client facing, but also has the ability to learn DSP if needs be. So you can't also just have a group of people who are solely focused on acquisition. You also need people who are going to be there to help drive awareness and drive consideration as well in like the full funnel. So so it's a tough channel, even though I said it's not a channel, but it's a tough environment, I would say, to actually hire into. So what we found is we basically look for the best and brightest across any area of the business. And I think the key thing for me is there's so many transferable skills. So we have people in programmatic who out and out know programmatic and they want to understand more about retailers. Like that's perfect. That's an easy transition. We have people in paid search who have got interest in Amazon, for example, and sponsor campaigns, and they're easy to bring in. I think the big challenge at the moment is, and I think you mentioned previously, I think you referred to it as the tidal wave rather than the third wave of retail media, is the demand is outstripping the talent, like so heavily. And what's actually happening is there's sort of this race for qualified people, and I've seen people demand or kind of request roles which, if they were in any other channel, they wouldn't even be necessarily close to. People who have come into the industry with 18 months experience, looking for really senior roles within the channel, and they're not necessarily tried and tested. They might have the skills to actually do that. So rather than looking to sort of get those people into the business, although there's a reason to have them there, we definitely took the approach of creating the next round of managers for the future. We have bets on the fact that retail media is going to be big. It's not going to go away. Is it going to be as big as everyone thinks it is? It could surpass it. It could be smaller, but it's not going away. So we started in the middle of last year. We hired a cohort of people, all entry level, all graduates, or graduates or people who wanted to get out of the work that they were currently doing, and we trained them up. and they are the next wave of our retail media specialists, basically. So we know that there's going to be a demand for them in the future, and it's just so much easier to do that. And actually, in going through that, we're actually we're putting into them all the skills that we need. So we're not just putting into them the paid search and then hoping that we can transfer them. We're putting in specific retail media. You know, they've gone through all the Sky training. They've gone through, you know, Criteo, Citrus, Amazon training, and everything. And it's really specific. So I think talent is incredibly difficult. There is this gap at the moment and this need for like senior resource. But certainly going in from the bottom up is definitely the best way forward, I think. You will need you do need a few individuals who have been, you know, around the business and generally like in the industry to help guide and shape those people. Yeah. So I think we're probably going to see, right now you'll see a lot of adverts for a lot of agencies for exec manager. I think once those have been populated, you know, probably throughout this year, I think suddenly you're going to start seeing a lot more assistant, entry-level, graduate type roles.
I mean, that's a good thing, right?
We're going to
be creating more jobs in the marketplace, and I think it's interesting that you talk about, I guess, hiring from within, taking other skill sets, and I think I've definitely seen that. In particular, you know, noticed, you know, agencies like yourselves bringing paid search people into you know, Amazon initially, and now broadening out to retail media. I think, as you said, that skill set, it all connects, right? It's all, again, coming back to that idea about connecting commerce and, you know, bringing retail media to the fore, but using all those different skill sets and making it work. So, well, look, Matt, it's been great having you on here, and we like to end with a kind of quick fire round.
Yeah, so I've been told.
Yeah, and I hear that you're a bit of a thrill seeker or like into extreme sports. I've done my research, so
it sounds like you stalked my Instagram. But
yeah. So I'm gonna go down that route for yours. So you know, answer off the top of your head, and I'll be thinking the questions off the top of my head as well. So, all right, we're gonna go with skiing or snowboarding.
Snowboarding.
Okay. UFC or boxing.
UFC.
Okay. Would you bungee jump or would you skydive?
Probably skydive.
Yeah, me too, definitely, every day.
Yeah.
All right, what's your favourite motorbike? I hear you're into bikes.
My favourite motorbike is probably a Yamaha R6. That's the one I grew up like with a photo on my wall.
I haven't got it yet, or you have?
I haven't, no. I do have I've got a Honda CB650.
Oh, nice.
So I do have a bike, but yeah, I don't know. The problem with the Yamaha is it's a dangerous bike. It's a license loser. So
right, okay. And final one. All right, what's your favourite extreme sport?
My favourite extreme sport, mountain biking, probably, if that's classed as extreme.
Well, it depends how extreme you go, I guess.
Well, yeah. So yeah, mountain biking, I would say, is my favourite.
Okay. All right. Well, look, Matt, it's been great having you on Retail Media Thursdays. Thanks for all your answers, and we'll finish our pint. And yeah, thanks for your back.
Perfect.
Cheers, buddy. Nice one.
Cheers, Dave.